What what's the role of a hospice worker, nurse? I'm guessing the family's a huge part of this.
Yeah.
You know,
Big time.
I think if you just think about it in general, oh, it's, you're gonna be with the person that's dying, that's not, but you have to remember there's a whole ecosystem around them. There's children, there's probably a partner, potentially a partner, other family members or friends that probably all have their roles they're trying to play. And by the time somebody gets sick, I'm guessing that by the time hospice gets there, maybe a spouse or a family members, they might be exhausted from caretaking themselves. And so you probably, I don't know if, are you like an intruder in that space, or is it a welcome relief?
friend?
Yeah. How do people respond to when you enter the scene, a hospice team enters the scene?
And it is so dynamic because you're dealing with myths of hospice. You're dealing with people's ideas and experiences. You're dealing with everything that led up to when I knock on the door and introduce myself. And I want to say something that I think is very important to honor. When I would knock on the door and introduce myself, the first thing I would say is, why hospice now? Why? What do you need?
Right.
Because I think it can be very threatening to someone who has been spending the last 9 months battling a terminal illness and doctor's visits and dealing with crazy family dynamics and caregiver swap. Like a lot of times the spouse will become the caregiver.
Yeah.
Or the son will have to fly in and leave his job and his life to take care of his dad. There's a lot of dynamics going on. So I'm very sensitive and attuned to understanding that me walking in is not the beginning of the story. I'm entering into the symphony midstream. And so there's a lot of like me asking the questions. And after I hear the person's story, I have a general sense of understanding what they need. Do they need someone to come in and do the pain management and just handle that? Like stay out of the social dynamics, just do the pain management. Totally fine. Yeah. What's the problem? But sometimes it's caregiver fatigue. And you can see this as a clear marker. Especially like with Alzheimer's dementia, the patient themselves will have the haircut, buttoned up, looking well, belts on, clean, and the caregiver's just like physically drained and exhausted and hasn't eaten. And it's almost like a swap. Like, wait, I thought you were the patient. And sometimes I would sit down with the caregiver. Usually it's the wife. And I would ask her to describe to me how it's been caring for your husband in this manner. And it's always mixed with like, I love him, or we had tough times. I can't leave him. I've 65 years of marriage. I never would, but it's killing me. And I would gently place my hand on her hand and say, okay, well, I'm firing you. You're no longer the caregiver. You're the wife. We'll do the caregiving. And you'll see this burden lift from her in the form of tears, as she realizes I have been neglecting my role as a wife in order to survive taking care of my husband as a caregiver. And so hospice can be incredibly therapeutic and comforting, coming in and filling in the gaps where it's needed.
Yeah. So after doing this for so many years, I mean, this is what Antonia started off with. This has to change you as a person. This has to bring things up for you. Like, you're confronted with your mortality in general, but also you probably are reflecting on your own mortality through all of this and the people you love. Like, oh, what will my life and my wife's experience be at the end of our exit? Like, you're going through the process of this over and over again with like different people. What are some of the lessons you've pulled in your own life as an ENFJ with ENFJ preferences? Like, what are some things that have come up for you?
I think the biggest one is, I mean, if I can just go right into it, faith is a massive theme in hospice care. I don't know what it is completely about death, but it makes us be very honest about what we believe regarding spirituality and faith and the afterlife. And for that reason, I think it's the only healthcare profession where we have chaplains. I mean, there's chaplains everywhere in every field, but I mean, the chaplain plays in a 50% role, as well as the hospice nurse. I mean, the hospice team is a nurse, a social worker, and a chaplain, because we recognize I mean, we're spiritual beings. And it's going to look different for everyone. And giving people permission to express their spirituality at the end of life is it's inspiring. And the way I think about it is, I myself started hospice care with my faith, and it was like this core building in my life. But as I began to meet more and more people, I mean, you're talking like 9 to 10 people a day that you would meet with, of all kinds of different faiths and backgrounds, I found that this one house that I had built wasn't enough to serve everyone. And so I began to go through my own spirituality and understand, how can I expand my faith to not negate the core of who I am and what I was brought up believing, but how can I almost like do an addition, an add-on? And so I began to build like, I can adopt this part of that faith, and I can almost do like an add-on. And then I would build like a courtyard. And then over time, I realized I'd built these layers of spirituality and faith because I wanted to be able to accommodate anyone. And so if it was someone who maybe had my faith background, I could bring them to that part of my spirituality and say, oh yeah, I can accommodate that. And if it was someone that I had adopted a spirituality with, I could also accommodate them as well. So I think one of the ways hospice changed me was it helped my faith expand without letting go of that nucleus and not getting rid of it. It's just the nucleus though.
Yeah.
Yeah.